A single playing card, a queen of hearts with a faded back and a crease near the corner, was all it took to detonate a $10 billion empire. When Alistair Blackwood, the phantom of the financial world, walked into a restaurant dressed like a man the world had forgotten, he wasn't looking for a meal. He was looking for an heir. He never expected to find one in Quinn, a waitress whose hands were raw from work and whose smile was the only currency she had left. But when he left her that single card as a tip, her response didn't just surprise him. It became the new cornerstone of his entire legacy, forcing him to disinherit the vipers he called his children and leave everything to the one person who understood the card's true value. The Gilded Cage was a restaurant that sold nostalgia. It was a place of dark wood, brass fixtures, and hushed conversations, where the city's elite paid a fortune to feel like they had earned it. For Quinn, it was just a job, a grueling, 10-hour-a-day tightrope walk between condescending patrons and her perpetually irate manager, Mr. Finch. Every clink of silverware, every polite nod was a performance, a mask she wore to earn the money she desperately needed. Tonight, the mask felt heavier than usual. She checked her phone between clearings tables, her thumb hovering over the latest message from the children's hospital. Finn's preliminary results are in. We need to discuss the next steps for the trial. Please call to schedule. Next steps was code for more money. The experimental treatment that was Finn's only hope cost more per month than she made in a year. Her little brother, a boy whose world had shrunk to a hospital bed, deserved more than her meager tips could provide. Finn, with his wide, curious eyes, and a deck of cards he shuffled with weak but determined hands, was the reason she endured the Gilded Cage. He was a magician in the making, he'd say, convinced that a little bit of wonder could fix anything. Table 7 is complaining about the temperature of their water. Quinn, Mr. Finch hissed, his voice a dry rustle of impatience. He was a man built of sharp angles and disapproval. And you've been on your phone. Again. Is your personal life more important than our patron's satisfaction? No, Mr. Finch. My apologies, she said, the words tasting like ash. She tucked the phone away, the hospital's message burning a hole in her pocket. It was then that the heavy oak door swung open, letting in a gust of wind and a man who seemed to be made of shadows and forgotten things. He was old, with a cascade of untamed white hair and a threadbare tweed coat that had seen better decades. He leaned on a simple, unadorned cane, and his eyes, a startlingly bright, intelligent blue, scanned the opulent room, not with awe, but with a kind of weary assessment. Finch was on him in an instant, a vulture swooping down. "Sir, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This is a private establishment with a dress code." The old man's blue eyes settled on Finch. "I read your menu in the window. It said you serve food, not fabric." His voice was a low rumble, laced with an authority that seemed at odds with his appearance. "We reserve the right to refuse service," Finch said, puffing out his chest. "Now, if you'll please leave before you disturb our guests." "It's all right, Mr. Finch." Quinn's voice cut through the tension. She stepped forward, placing herself between her manager and the old man. "There's an open table in my section. In the corner, it's no trouble at all." Finch shot her a look of pure venom. "This is your final warning, Quinn. He orders the cheapest thing on the menu and leaves without a tip. It's coming out of your pay." "Understood," she said, not flinching. She turned to the old man and gave him a genuine smile, the first she'd felt all night. "Right this way, sir. The corner booth is the quietest." The man looked at her, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He didn't say thank you, but simply nodded and followed her to the secluded table. He moved with a peculiar grace, as if his frail body was a deliberate disguise. He ordered a black coffee and a bowl of the house soup, the two least expensive items available. Quinn served him with the same quiet efficiency she gave the table of stockbrokers, running up a 4-figure tab nearby. She refilled his water without being asked. She brought him an extra basket of bread, pretending the kitchen had made a mistake. He ate in silence, watching her. It wasn't the vacant stare of a lonely old man. It was an intense, analytical observation. He watched how she handled the demanding couple at table 9, how she patiently explained the menu to a confused tourist, how she picked up a dropped fork for a child without breaking her stride. When he was finished, he beckoned her over. He had no wallet, but he reached deep into the pocket of his worn coat. Quinn expected a few crumpled bills, maybe some loose change. Instead, his hand emerged, holding a single playing card. He placed it face down on the table, his long, elegant fingers resting on it for a moment before he stood up. "This is for you," he rasped, and then he turned and walked toward the door. Quinn stared at the card. Mr. Finch was already marching toward the table, his face a thundercloud of triumph. "Well, well, let's see what your charity case left you. A piece of trash, I presume." He reached the table just as Quinn picked up the card. She turned it over. It was a Queen of Hearts. The card was old, the edges softened with use, the back a faded, intricate pattern of vines and birds she'd never seen before. It felt warm in her hand. "A playing card," Finch sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "He tipped you with garbage. That's it. You're fired, Quinn. I've had enough of your bleeding heart theatrics. Pack your things and get out." "Wait." Quinn's voice was soft, but it stopped him cold. She wasn't looking at Finch. She was looking at the old man who had paused at the doorway, his back to them. She held up the card. "Sir," she called out, her voice clear and steady. The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent. "I can't accept this." The old man slowly turned, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. Finch laughed. "Of course you can't accept it, you idiot. It's worthless." "You're wrong," Quinn said, her gaze never leaving the old man. She took a step toward him. "It's not worthless at all. It's far too valuable." She held the Queen of Hearts between her fingers. "My little brother. He loves magic. He says every card tells a story. The king is power, the jack is a rogue, the ace is a spark of potential." She paused, her throat tightening. "But the Queen of Hearts, she's different. She isn't about power or luck. She's about compassion. She's the one card in the deck that represents kindness for its own sake." "You don't give this card as a payment," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You give it as a promise that you'll hold on to hope, that you'll be kind even when the world deals you a terrible hand." She walked right up to the old man and gently pressed the card back into his hand. Her fingers brushed against his, and she was surprised by their strength. "You keep it, sir. It looks like you've held on to it for a long time. You need its promise more than I need a tip." The old man stared at the card in his palm, then back at her. A profound, shattering emotion washed over his face. It wasn't just surprise. It was a kind of painful recognition, as if she had just spoken a long-forgotten language. He closed his hand around the card, clutching it tightly. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. He simply nodded once, a deep, solemn gesture, and then he was gone, the heavy door swinging shut behind him. Quinn stood there for a moment, the silence of the room pressing in on her. She turned to face Finch, expecting the final, explosive tirade. But he was just staring at the door, his mouth agape, utterly baffled by what he had just witnessed. What neither of them knew was that the old man was Alistair Blackwood, a billionaire so reclusive He was practically a myth. And in his youth, before he built his empire, he was Blackwood the Magnificent, one of the world's greatest stage illusionists, a master of sleight of hand. The Queen of Hearts in his hand was from his very first deck, his lucky card, the one he kept as a reminder of a life before money had poisoned everything. He hadn't come to the restaurant for soup. He had come for a sign, and a waitress named Quinn had just handed him the future. As he stepped out into the cold night, a black Bentley with silent tinted windows pulled up to the curb. A chauffeur in a crisp uniform opened the door. "Home, Mr. Blackwood?" the driver asked. Alistair slid into the plush leather seat, the scent of old money replacing the smell of chicken soup. He looked at the worn Queen of Hearts in his hand. "No, Graves," he said, his voice no longer raspy, but the clear, commanding tone of a CEO. "Get Elias Vance on the phone. Tell him it's an emergency. We're rewriting my will. Tonight." The Blackwood estate was less a house and more a small, sovereign nation of marble and manicured lawns perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Inside its climate-controlled walls, Alistair's children, Gideon and Isolde, were circling the family fortune like a pair of designer vultures. They had been born into a world where price tags were the only form of validation, and their father's encroaching mortality was not a tragedy, but a business opportunity. "He did it again," Isolde said, her voice a sharp staccato against the glass of her smartphone. She was pacing the length of a priceless Persian rug, her presence making the cavernous drawing room feel small and tense. Security just called. He slipped out without his detail, dressed like a vagrant. A vagrant, Gideon. If the press gets a photo of him digging through a trash can, the stock will drop 10 points before the market even opens. Gideon Blackwood, lounging on a silk chaise, barely looked up from the tablet displaying his polo team's latest match scores. "Relax, Izzy. Let the old man have his fantasies. The board already thinks he's eccentric. What's one more bizarre outing?" "This is different," she snapped. "He's been meeting with Elias Vance. Late-night meetings. The family lawyer, Gideon. What reason could he have for that, other than to mess with the trusts?" That got his attention. Gideon sat up, his casual demeanor evaporating. "Vance? Are you sure? Graves told my assistant. Father is planning something. I can feel it. He's testing us. This whole charade of poverty, it's some kind of twisted moral examination he's cooked up in his decaying mind." "Then we'd better make sure we pass," Gideon said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Call the hospital. Make a sizable donation to the children's wing, the one he likes. Get our pictures in the paper. We'll play the part of the devoted, charitable children. By the time he's gone, the board and the public will see us as the only stable choice to take over." While they plotted their performance of filial piety, Alistair Blackwood sat in his private study, a room that smelled of old books and regret. Across a vast mahogany desk sat Elias Vance, a man whose face seemed carved from the same stoic, patient stone as the gargoyles on a cathedral. He had been Alistair's lawyer and confidant for 40 years. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Alistair?" Elias asked, his pen hovering over a document thick enough to stop a bullet. To remove Gideon and Isolde entirely, it's not just disinheritance, it's a declaration of war. Alistair coughed, a dry, painful sound that shook his frail frame. A doctor's report lay on the corner of the desk, its diagnosis a death sentence in clinical, sterile font. "They declared war on my soul years ago, Elias. I raised them with everything money could buy, and in doing so, I bought them nothing of value. They see my legacy as a pile of assets to be liquidated, not a responsibility to be carried." He closed his eyes, and the image of Quinn's face appeared in the darkness. That girl, the waitress, her name is Quinn. She has a brother in the pediatric oncology ward. The very wing Isolde is probably making a tax-deductible donation to as we speak. Quinn works 80 hours a week for a pittance, and she looked at a worthless playing card and saw something of immense value. She saw a promise. He opened his eyes, and they burned with a feverish intensity. My children look at a billion-dollar company and see only a tip. She is the only one who understands the magic. She's the only one who can be trusted with the secrets. They will fight this, Elias warned. They will drag her through the mud. They will paint her as a gold-digging opportunist who took advantage of a dying, senile old man. Which is why you will protect her, Alistair said, sliding a thick file across the desk. I had my security team do a full workup. Quinn Sullivan. Her life is an open book of struggle and sacrifice. No secrets, no skeletons. Just a mountain of medical debt and an unshakable devotion to her brother, Finn. Alistair picked up the pen. His hand was weak, but his signature was firm. The will is to be structured as follows. Gideon and Isolde are to receive $1 each, and my collection of antique magic posters, a reminder of the wonder they never appreciated. He paused, a ghost of a smile on his lips. The entirety of my estate, my controlling shares in Blackwood Innovations, and the guardianship of my life's work, it all goes to her, to Quinn Sullivan. And what is this life's work? Elias asked, pointing to a clause he'd never seen before. The Phoenix Project? Alistair's smile faded, replaced by a look of profound seriousness. That, my friend, is the real inheritance. And it's the reason Gideon and Isolde can never, ever have control. The company is just the lock. The Phoenix Project is what's inside the box. He signed the last page. It's done. Let them have their games. The real magic is about to begin. 3 weeks later, the news broke like a tidal wave. Alistair Blackwood, Titan of Tech, dead at 76. The financial world mourned the loss of a king. Tributes flowed, stocks fluctuated, and flags were lowered to half-mast. At the Gilded Cage, the news was just background noise on the small television behind the bar. Quinn was in the middle of the lunch rush, her mind a frantic mess of calculations. The hospital had called again. Finn's condition had taken a turn. The clinical trial was his last chance, but the initial payment was due in 48 hours. It was an impossible sum. An eviction notice was taped to her apartment door. She was drowning. She caught a glimpse of Alistair Blackwood's photo on the screen. It was an old picture, showing a handsome, powerful man in a tuxedo. She felt a small pang of sadness for the kind, lonely old man she had met, wondering if he had found some peace. She never saw him again after that night. She still felt a fool for turning down what was probably his last few dollars. Her phone buzzed, a text from her landlord. Quinn, I'm sorry. The new owners are inflexible. If you don't have the back rent by tomorrow, I have to start the eviction process. A tray of glasses slipped from her trembling hand, shattering on the tile floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the crowded restaurant. "Sullivan!" Mr. Finch roared from his office. "That's coming out of your paycheck." As she knelt to pick up the broken glass, tears of desperation blurring her vision, she didn't see the black Bentley pull up outside. She didn't see the tall, somber man in the expensive suit step out and walk through the restaurant's doors, his expression grim and determined. The reading of the will took place in the estate's library, a room so quiet you could hear the dust settle. Gideon and Isolde sat opposite Elias Vance, their faces arranged in masks of practiced grief, their eyes gleaming with avarice. "Let's dispense with the formalities, Elias," Gideon said impatiently. "We know Father's wishes. A 50-50 split of the assets, with controlling interest of the board passing to me." Elias adjusted his spectacles, his face unreadable. Alistair made some unconventional arrangements in his final days. He opened the thick leather-bound will. "To my son, Gideon, I leave my collection of magic posters and $1 for him to invest as wisely as he has invested his allowance." The color drained from Gideon's face. "What? Is this a joke?" "To my daughter Isolde," Elias continued, his voice a monotone. "I leave my collection of antique puzzle boxes in the hope that she might one day solve one, and a single dollar. I leave no equity, no property, and no access to any company funds to either of you." Isolde shot to her feet, her chair clattering to the floor. He was insane. He was medicated. He wasn't competent. "We will contest this. We will sue you into oblivion, Vance." "I haven't finished," Elias said, his voice cutting through her tirade. "The entirety of the Blackwood estate, including all properties, assets, and the controlling 51% stake in Blackwood Innovations, is left to a single, non-familial beneficiary." "Who?" Gideon whispered, his voice hoarse. "Who is it?" Elias looked up, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. "The sole heir to the Blackwood fortune is a Ms. Quinn Sullivan." "Who the hell is Quinn Sullivan?" Isolde shrieked. "She is a waitress at the Gilded Cage," Elias said calmly. "And my next stop is to inform her that, as of 10 minutes ago, she is the new owner of this house." "Security," he said, gesturing to 2 large men standing by the door. "Please escort Mr. and Ms. Blackwood from the premises. The new owner will decide if they are ever to be allowed back." As Gideon and Isolde were dragged out, screaming threats and curses, Elias closed the will. He walked out of the silent, shocked room and got into his waiting car. "To the Gilded Cage, Graves," he said to the driver. "I believe I have a tip for one of the waitstaff." The scene at the restaurant was one of quiet humiliation. Mr. Finch stood over Quinn, who was on her hands and knees, a dustpan full of broken glass in her hand. "You're a liability, Quinn. A clumsy, distracted, emotional liability. Give me your apron. You're fired." Just as Quinn was about to beg for her job, the doors opened and Elias Vance walked in. The entire restaurant seemed to pause. In his immaculate suit, he was an emissary from a different reality. "I am looking for Miss Quinn Sullivan," he announced, his voice commanding the room. Finch, instantly shifting into obsequious mode, gestured at Quinn with a dismissive wave. "Her? She was just leaving. Fired for incompetence. If you're here about a debt she owes—" "On the contrary," Elias said, walking directly to Quinn and offering her a hand. "I am here to settle a debt owed to her." He helped her to her feet. "My name is Elias Vance. I was the personal attorney for the late Alistair Blackwood." Quinn stared at him, confused. "The man from the news?" "You knew him as the gentleman with the tweed coat," Elias said gently. "The man you showed kindness to, the man to whom you returned a very important playing card." Quinn's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, he passed away. I'm so sorry. He was deeply moved by your actions, Miss Sullivan. In his final days, he spoke of little else." Elias placed his briefcase on the table where Alistair had sat. He clicked it open. "He has named you in his will." "He left me something?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "A keepsake?" "He left you everything," Elias said, his eyes locking with hers. He pulled out a sheaf of documents. "You are the sole beneficiary of the Blackwood estate. Effective immediately, you are the majority shareholder of Blackwood Innovations and the owner of all associated assets. The total value is estimated to be north of $10 billion. The world tilted on its axis. Quinn grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Billion? With a B? With a B, Elias confirmed. Finch made a sound like a deflating balloon. He stared at Quinn, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fawning greed. Quinn! My dear girl, I was just testing you. A little motivational exercise. You passed with flying colors. Of course you're not fired. How about a promotion? Assistant manager. Quinn didn't even look at him. She looked at Elias, her mind reeling. The hospital bills, Finn's treatment, the eviction notice. It was all gone. The weight that had been crushing her for years suddenly vanished. She slowly untied her stained apron. She folded it neatly and placed it on the table next to the $10 billion legal documents. Mr. Finch, she said, her voice quiet, but imbued with a new, unshakable strength. I quit. She turned to Elias. Can you take me to my brother? Of course, Miss Sullivan, Elias said, a genuine smile finally breaking through his stony exterior. Your car is waiting outside. As they walked out, leaving a stunned restaurant and a hyperventilating manager in their wake, Quinn felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. But this was only the beginning. In a penthouse suite across town, Gideon and Isolde Blackwood were not mourning. They were plotting, and they had just found the one weapon that could bring Quinn's new world crashing down around her. They had found her brother's hospital file. The first few days were a dizzying blur of luxury and logistics. Quinn moved into the Blackwood estate, a place so vast and silent it felt more like a museum than a home. Finn was transferred to a private suite at the hospital, attended by the best doctors in the world, his confusion at the sudden change eclipsed by his delight at the room's magic-themed decorations, a touch Quinn had insisted on. She met with accountants, board members, and department heads, nodding along as they spoke a foreign language of mergers, acquisitions, and quarterly earnings. Through it all, Elias Vance was her translator and her shield, guiding her through the labyrinth of her new life. She made her first executive decision not in the boardroom, but in the estate's grand kitchen. She met the household staff, the maids, gardeners, and cooks who had served Alistair for decades, and saw the same fear in their eyes she had once seen in her own mirror. She doubled their salaries and established a scholarship fund for their children on the spot. In that moment, she wasn't a billionaire. She was just a waitress who finally had the power to give a decent tip. The counterattack came on a Tuesday morning. Quinn was in the hospital playroom with Finn, watching him practice a card trick with a new, steady-handed confidence, when Elias entered, his face grim. There's a problem, he said, his voice low. Gideon and Isolde. They've made their move. Are they suing? Quinn asked, her heart sinking. Worse, Elias said. They're not attacking you. They're attacking Finn. He handed her a tablet. On the screen was an official letter from the hospital's ethics board. They've filed a motion to have Finn removed from the experimental treatment program. They're citing a morality clause in the trial's charter. They claim that because the funds for his treatment are part of a contested and morally ambiguous inheritance, his continued participation poses a reputational risk to the hospital. Quinn felt the blood drain from her face. What? They can't do that. The money is there. I can pay for it 100 times over. It's not about the money, Elias explained, his voice tight with anger. It's about leverage. The head of the ethics board, Dr. Alcott, sits on the board of a charity that has received millions in donations from the Blackwood family for years. Gideon and Isolde are calling in a favor. They're holding Finn's life hostage. Just then, Quinn's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Elias nodded for her to answer. She put it on speaker. "Is this the waitress?" Isolde's voice was like ice chips in a glass. "I assume your lawyer has explained the situation. It's quite simple, really. My brother and I have a document prepared. You sign over the entire estate, every last share, back to its rightful owners. In exchange, we will graciously withdraw our objection to your brother's medical care. You'd kill a child just to get your money back," Quinn whispered, horrified. A dry laugh came through the phone. It was Gideon. "Don't be so dramatic. We're just correcting a clerical error made by a senile old man. This is a business transaction. You have 24 hours to sign. If you don't, the board will convene, and your brother will be back on a standard chemo drip by Friday. The clock is ticking, Quinn." The line went dead. Quinn stared at the phone, then at Finn, who was happily fanning a deck of cards, completely oblivious. She had $10 billion. She had an army of lawyers. She had the power to change the world. And in that moment, she was utterly, completely powerless. They had found the one thing she couldn't bear to lose, the one person she would sacrifice everything for. The gilded cage had just gotten infinitely larger. Quinn felt the sterile hospital air turn to ice in her lungs. The phone call echoed in the sudden, crushing silence of the playroom. 24 hours. They had put a price on Finn's life, and the currency was her surrender. She looked at her brother, so engrossed in his cards he hadn't noticed the world collapsing around them. He was practicing a clumsy fan, his small fingers still weak but more nimble than they'd been a month ago. The treatment was working. Elias Vance stood beside her, his face a mask of cold fury. "This is coercion. Extortion. It is highly illegal." "But it's working, isn't it?" Quinn's voice was a ragged whisper. "They'll have the board convened by tomorrow afternoon. We can't fight them in court in time. What good is $10 billion if I can't... if he..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The money had felt like a shield, but they had found the one gap in her armor. "We will find another hospital, another trial," Elias said, but his words lacked conviction. They both knew this specific experimental therapy was Finn's last and only hope. "There isn't time," she said, her gaze drifting back to Finn. He dropped a card and frowned in concentration. It was a jack of spades, the rogue, the trickster. Quinn's mind, usually a chaotic storm of worry, suddenly went unnaturally still. A single thought cut through the panic. Alistair Blackwood. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was a magician. Blackwood the Magnificent. Magicians were masters of misdirection. They showed you one hand while the other was performing the real trick. What was the trick he had been performing? "Elias," she said, her voice sharpening with a new, unfamiliar focus. "When you read the will, what exactly did he leave them? Gideon and Isolde?" Elias looked taken aback by the question. It was meant as an insult, a pittance, $1 each, and his collection of antique magic posters and antique puzzle boxes, I believe. Why, where are they now? The posters and the boxes? "In the garbage, most likely," Elias said. Gideon and Isolde had them thrown in a storage room in the east wing of the estate before they were escorted out. They saw them as worthless junk. "They see my legacy as a pile of assets to be liquidated," Alistair had said. "She is the only one who understands the magic." Quinn stood up, a current of adrenaline jolting her. "He wasn't insulting them, Elias. He was leaving them a test, the same kind of test he gave me." She looked at her watch. 22 hours left. "Take me back to the estate. Now." The East Wing storage room was cold and smelled of dust and neglect. Canvases in gold frames were stacked against the walls, their subjects hidden in shadow. In the center of the room was a pile of discarded items, what Gideon and Isolde had deemed trash. Quinn saw them immediately, a leather portfolio containing the magic posters and a heavy wooden chest filled with intricately carved puzzle boxes. While Elias watched, baffled, Quinn carefully lifted the portfolio onto a dusty table. She pulled out the posters one by one. They were beautiful, lithographs from the golden age of stage magic. Blackwood the Magnificent, the man who defies reality. One proclaimed, showing a stylized Alistair catching lightning in a bottle. Another depicted him escaping a locked chest submerged in water. "They're just advertisements for his old act," Elias said, confused. "No," Quinn murmured, her fingers tracing the intricate border of a poster titled The Phoenix Cabinet. "Finn taught me about this. Stage magicians hide things in plain sight. Codes, signals. Look." She pointed to the border. It was made of playing cards, a king of clubs, a 3 of diamonds, an ace of spades. But every 7th card was a queen of hearts. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the sequence. Then she turned to the chest of puzzle boxes. There were dozens of them, each a marvel of woodwork and engineering. Most were complex, polyhedral shapes, but one was different. It was simpler, a rosewood box with a single brass dial on the front, marked with the symbols of the 4 card suits: hearts, diamonds, clubs, spades. "It's a combination lock," she breathed. She looked at the sequence of cards from the poster. King of clubs. She turned the dial to clubs. 3 of diamonds. She turned it to diamonds. Ace of spades. She turned it to spades. She continued the sequence, her fingers flying across the dial. The final card in the sequence was, of course, the Queen of Hearts. As she turned the dial to hearts, a soft click echoed in the silent room. A hidden drawer slid open from the bottom of the box. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was not a document, but a single ornate brass key. Beneath it lay a folded piece of parchment. Quinn carefully unfolded it. It was a note, written in Alistair's elegant, spidery script. "My dear heir," it read. "My children see only the cage, not the bird. They believe the company is the prize, but it is merely the lock. The real inheritance, my life's work, is called the Phoenix Project. It waits in my private workshop, a place not on any blueprint. The world thinks my greatest trick was escaping the Iron Maiden. My greatest trick was building a laboratory in plain sight. Go to my office at headquarters. Find the Queen. She holds the key to everything." Quinn's hands were shaking as she held the key. "The Phoenix Project," she whispered, looking at Elias. "He mentioned it when he wrote the will." Elias's eyes were wide with a new understanding. "His private workshop. I always assumed it was a metaphor. The board was told it was a secure server room. No one has been inside in over a decade." They raced to the Blackwood Innovations Tower, a sleek monolith of glass and steel that pierced the clouds. The CEO's office was on the top floor, a cavernous space with a panoramic view of the city. It was minimalist and modern, a stark contrast to the old-world clutter of the estate. One wall was dominated by a massive, abstract oil painting, a chaotic swirl of black and grey with a single, startling splash of crimson in the center. "Find the Queen," Quinn repeated Alistair's words, her eyes scanning the room. There were no playing cards, no obvious clues. She walked the perimeter, her hand trailing along the cool marble walls. Elias checked the desk, the bookshelves. Nothing. Quinn stopped in front of the huge painting. It was unsettling, almost violent. But as she stared at the splash of red, its shape began to resolve. It wasn't just a random splotch, it was a heart. and hidden within the abstract lines around it, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, was the faint outline of a woman's profile. A face, a crown, the Queen of Hearts, hidden in plain sight. Quinn pressed her hand against the crimson heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, a section of the wall beside the painting slid away, revealing a hidden door with a single brass keyhole. Quinn inserted the key from the puzzle box. The lock turned with a satisfying thud. The heavy door swung inward, revealing not a server room, but a world frozen in time. It was Alistair's true office, his workshop. Books on cellular biology and genetic engineering were stacked next to volumes on sleight of hand. Blueprints for microprocessors shared desk space with diagrams for magic tricks. And in the center of the room, on a refrigerated pedestal, was a single vial of clear liquid that seemed to glow with an inner light. On the desk was a leather-bound journal and a tablet. Quinn opened the journal. It was Alistair's logbook for the Phoenix Project. As she read, the scope of his genius, his true legacy, unfurled before her. The Phoenix Project wasn't a product. It was a miracle, a bespoke gene therapy that used a benign virus to deliver restorative code to damaged cells, prompting them to regenerate. It could, in theory, cure anything from spinal injuries to degenerative diseases. To cancer. "My God," Elias breathed, reading over her shoulder. This could end human suffering as we know it. And his children would have sold it to the highest bidder, Quinn said, feeling a profound wave of sorrow and understanding for the lonely old man. They would have turned a miracle into a commodity. She picked up the tablet. It was locked, but the background image was a picture of a single playing card, the faded Queen of Hearts he had given her. She typed in the password, COMPASSION. It unlocked. There was only one file on the screen, a video file labeled Poison Pill. Quinn pressed play. Alistair's face appeared, older and more tired than in his posters, but his blue eyes were blazing. He was sitting in this very room. "Hello, Elias," he began, his voice raspy. "If you are watching this, it means my children have done the predictable. They have mistaken cruelty for strength and chosen to attack my heir rather than accept their failure. They believe they are holding all the cards." He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. But a good magician always keeps an ace up his sleeve. The Phoenix Project is inextricably linked to the hospital that bears my wife's name. The very hospital where, if my research is correct, Ms. Sullivan's brother is a patient. Blackwood Innovations is the hospital's largest private benefactor, the primary funder of its ethics board and its experimental trials. He leaned closer to the camera. "I built a failsafe into the corporate charter, a poison pill. Any attempt by the majority shareholder to use the company's financial leverage to unduly influence or threaten the hospital's ethical charter, for instance, by threatening to pull funding to remove a patient from a trial, will be considered a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty. The moment such a threat is officially logged, the charter dictates that all patents and intellectual property related to the Phoenix Project are to be immediately and irrevocably transferred to a newly formed public trust, to be managed by an independent body for the public good. The project will become worthless to the company overnight." Alistair Blackwood, the master illusionist, looked directly into the camera. "They think they are trying to steal a $10 billion company, but if they proceed, they will be the ones who give my greatest secret away to the world for free. They will destroy the very prize they are trying to claim." Checkmate. The video ended. Quinn stood in the silent workshop, the tablet in her hand. She had the key. She had the truth. She had the final, impossible trick. She looked at her watch. 4 hours until the ethics board meeting. Elias, she said, her voice no longer trembling, but ringing with the clear, commanding tone of a CEO. Get me the head of hospital security and the chairman of the board on a conference call, and find Dr. Alcott. Tell him I'm coming to his meeting. I have a presentation he won't want to miss. The hospital conference room was sterile and intimidating. A long mahogany table reflected the cold, fluorescent lights. Dr. Alcott, a man with a perpetually worried expression, sat at its head. On one side sat Gideon and Isolde, their lawyers flanking them like well-dressed gargoyles. They looked confident, predatory. They believed they had won. The door opened, and Quinn walked in. She was alone. She carried a single tablet. Ms. Sullivan, Dr. Alcott began, clearing his throat nervously. We are here to discuss a serious ethical concern raised by the Blackwood family regarding the funding of your brother's treatment. Save it, Alcott, Isolde interrupted, her voice dripping with false sympathy. It's quite simple, Quinn. We have the document here. Sign over your shares, and we will withdraw our concerns. Your brother can continue his treatment. It's the best deal you're going to get. Quinn walked to the head of the table and placed the tablet down. She looked not at Isolde, but at the entire board. You've all been misled, she said, her voice steady and clear. You believe this is about a contested inheritance. You believe you are protecting the hospital's reputation. You are not. You are being used as pawns in a failed corporate takeover. Gideon laughed. Oh, the waitress has a flair for the dramatic. Just sign the papers, dear. You're out of your league. On the contrary, Quinn said, tapping the screen of the tablet. I'm about to show you exactly what league I'm in. She played the video. The room went silent as Alistair Blackwood's face filled the large screen on the wall. His voice, filled with a posthumous, unimpeachable authority, explained the poison pill clause. He detailed the exact nature of the Phoenix Project. He named the hospital as the intended primary partner in its development. The color drained from Gideon's face. Isolde's smirk froze, then crumbled. Dr. Alcott looked as if he was about to faint. They hadn't just been caught in an act of monstrous cruelty. They had been caught in an act of colossal stupidity. They had been threatening to burn down a vault while standing inside it. When the video ended, Quinn spoke into the silence. The motion you filed this morning, threatening to use your influence to have Finn Sullivan removed from this trial, was the official trigger for the poison pill. Your lawyers submitted it an hour ago, which means, as of this moment, the Phoenix Project, the most valuable medical discovery in human history, no longer belongs to Blackwood Innovations. A lawyer on Gideon's team scrambled for his phone. She's bluffing! Am I? Quinn asked calmly. Just then her phone buzzed. She put it on speaker. Ms. Sullivan, a crisp official voice said. This is Chairman Davies of the SEC. We've just received the alert from the Blackwood Innovations Charter Trust. Is it correct that the Phoenix Project patent portfolio has been transferred to public domain? Yes, Mr. Davies, Quinn said, her eyes locked on Gideon and Isolde. Due to a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty by 2 minority shareholders, who I believe are also guilty of extortion, a fact I have on a recorded phone call, which I am forwarding to your office and the district attorney. Isolde let out a strangled gasp. Gideon shot to his feet, his chair crashing to the floor. You tricked us! That was our father's work, our legacy. Your legacy was a chance to cure the sick, and you tried to trade it to kill a child, Quinn said, her voice dropping, filled with a cold, righteous anger. You were given the keys to the kingdom, and you used them to try and lock a sick little boy out in the cold. You don't deserve a legacy. Dr. Alcott, seeing his career and the hospital's future evaporating, finally found his voice. "This meeting is adjourned. The board finds no merit in the complaint. Finn Sullivan's treatment will continue uninterrupted, of course." "It's too late for that, Doctor," Quinn said, turning her gaze to him. "You allowed this to happen. You were complicit. As the new head of the Phoenix Project Public Trust, my first act will be to establish a new, independent ethics board to oversee its distribution. You will not be on it." Security entered the room, summoned by Elias, who had been waiting outside. As they escorted the sputtering, defeated Blackwood siblings away, Quinn walked over to the large window overlooking the city. She had lost the company's most valuable asset. She had given away a discovery worth trillions. And yet, she had never felt richer. 1 year later, the auditorium at the World Health Summit in Geneva was packed. Quinn Sullivan stood at the podium, no longer looking like a waitress or a terrified heir, but like the leader she had become. Alistair Blackwood believed in magic, she told the crowd of scientists, doctors, and philanthropists. But he knew the greatest magic wasn't deception. It was revelation. The Phoenix Project, now publicly funded and available in 14 countries, is his greatest revelation. She smiled as a small figure walked out from the wings to join her. Finn, his hair grown back, his cheeks full and rosy, was beaming. He held a deck of cards. "My brother Finn was the first recipient of the Phoenix therapy," Quinn continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Today he is cancer-free." The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Finn stepped up to the microphone. "My sister taught me that every card tells a story," he said, his voice clear and confident. He fanned the deck with the practiced ease of a professional. "But she also taught me that you get to write the ending." With a flick of his wrist, he produced a single card from the fan and handed it to Quinn. It was the Queen of Hearts. Far away, Gideon and Isolde watched the broadcast from a cramped, run-down apartment, having lost everything in the ensuing legal battles. Their names were now a footnote in business textbooks, a cautionary tale of greed and hubris. They saw Quinn hold up the card to the cheering crowd. "Alistair Blackwood left me his fortune," Quinn concluded, her eyes finding Finn's. "But his true gift wasn't the money. It was a promise that you hold on to hope, that you are kind even when the world deals you a terrible hand. Because true value is not what you own. It's what you choose to give away."